I knew I was screwed the first time I saw him. Xander Rice wasn't just trouble. He was the kind of trouble that burned careers to the ground. Too young, too bold, too damn reckless. The kind of guy who wasn't afraid of the cameras, of the headlines, of the consequences. The kind of guy who looked at me like he already knew what I looked like falling apart. I should have shut it down the first time he tested me. The first time he smirked like he knew something I didn't, but I didn't. Because the sickest part of me, the part I've spent years burying under discipline, control, and a carefully crafted lie, wanted him to see what was underneath. And now, he does. And he likes it, because dreams belong to everyone, even the broken ones. And for the first time in years, I'm starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, one of mine still belongs to me. Chapter 1. Marcus. Is that really necessary? I asked Millie, as she dumped the rest of my belongings onto the street, kicking over the rubbish bin for good measure. Millie wasn't just breaking up with me. She was tearing everything we'd built apart. As the last of my stuff tumbled from her hands to the street, my heart sank. There was no turning back now. Never mind. You wanker! If I ever see you here again, I'll destroy you. Appreciate the hospitality, Millie. Tell your mom I'll be over for dinner later. She let out an inhuman screech and flipped me off before stomping back into her townhouse and slamming the door shut. Well, that went well. I stared at all my stuff strewn across the driveway, my designer clothes and t-shirts now cozied up with whatever garbage Millie hadn't burned in her warpath of destruction. The rubbish bin lay on its side, like even it had given up. Great. I looked up at the heavens, watching the clouds swell and darken, as God, never one to miss a good joke, decided to make this day even better by sending down rain. Yeah. London was certainly a shining star. I swallowed at the lump rising in my throat. 10 years. Millie was willing to throw away 10 years of our relationship, and she wasn't wrong. I had been a crappy boyfriend. The worst of the worst. I didn't deserve a second chance. Not after everything I put her through. I deserved this. I deserved worse. It was pathetic. Stuffing whatever I could into my knapsack, I decided to leave the rest and headed to my pickup truck, peeling out of the driveway. I cranked the radio, hoping the sound of Taylor Swift's London Boy would drown out my misery. It didn't. Not only did it not work, but soon I was singing at the top of my lungs, wishing I were dead. Because what type of grown man loved Taylor Swift? This one. As soon as I pulled up to a red light, I killed the music, keeping my face stony. 'Twas my dirty little secret. If my mates ever found out, they'd keel over with laughter. The purr of my Chevrolet Silverado 1500 rumbled beneath my hands as I drove toward my apartment in Holloway Park, a small, overpriced neighborhood in North London that smelled like coffee in the mornings and piss after dark. At least Millie had the decency to dump all my stuff at the side of the road instead of burning it like she promised. Well, most of it. I sighed hard, grabbed what I could from the back, and headed inside. It had been a mistake to go there. I knew the moment she said I should pick up my stuff that it was a trap. With my arms full of clothes, I fumbled with my key, cursing under my breath as I tried to jam it into the lock. The second the door swung open, a massive weight barreled into me, nearly knocking me off my feet. "Pancakes, Jesus!" My Rottweiler wagged his tail so hard, his entire body swayed. His big brown eyes looking up at me like I hadn't just left him alone for a few hours, but for years. I managed to stumble inside. Yeah, I missed you too, buddy," I muttered, scratching behind his ears. "Now move before I trip and die. And then who's gonna feed you? Pancakes barked. Are you taking the piss? You can't go crying to the neighbors. Those guys are tossers. I dumped whatever I could into the washing machine, and whatever else had been burnt, I tossed into the rubbish bin. Well, I guess that was the end of that. I sank down on the couch and sighed deeply, running a hand through my hair, closing my eyes. Pancakes jumped onto my lap and started nuzzling against my firm stomach. I patted his head absent-mindedly, my mind drifting back to my fight with Millie. We weren't supposed to end like this. I mean, I knew I'd been a crap boyfriend for the past decade, but I thought we'd eventually work it out, not have it end in World War III. Besides, her mum, Tina, was a riot. We'd gotten on like a house on fire, and I knew Millie wouldn't let us hang out anymore. Pancakes shoved his head against my stomach, snorting like a bull. Yeah, me too, buddy, I grumbled. Whatever. I sat there wondering what I could do to try to win her back. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but I considered Millie my best friend. Maybe it was too soon for all that. Maybe I should give her space and try to keep my distance for now. Even as my designer clothes lay scattered across the street like garbage, I realized the only thing I could salvage was the thought of fixing things with Millie. But what if there was nothing left to fix? We didn't work together anymore. Besides, after telling her what I did, I doubt she'd ever look at me the same way ever again. Things came crashing down after my injury. My leg had never been the same since that night. One wrong tackle, a sickening crunch, and my femur shattered like glass. The pain was instant, blinding, a white-hot agony that stole my breath as I hit the pitch. I remember the roar of the crowd turning into a dull hum, the world blurring as medics rushed in. One moment, I was a rising star, unstoppable, untouchable. The next, I was writhing on the ground, my career crumbling beneath me, like sand slipping through my fingers. The recovery had been brutal. Months of surgeries, rehab, and empty reassurances from doctors who couldn't promise I'd ever play the same again. Deep down, I knew the truth. My body had failed me. The dream I had spent my entire life chasing had been ripped away in an instant. Millie had been there to pick up the pieces. She saw me at my lowest, angry, lost, a man without a purpose. She stuck by me when I was too bitter to appreciate it, too stubborn to admit I needed her. And it wasn't like I hated coaching. I loved it. I loved the boys, the game, the rush of competition. But the money wasn't great, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, like I was destined for more. I only taught at the university level, but what if I could coach pro athletes? What if I could take everything I had learned, the glory, the pain, the sacrifice, and use it to shape the next generation? Maybe I wasn't meant to be on the pitch anymore, but that didn't mean I had to stop chasing greatness. I sighed, yawning, and turned on the TV, flicking to the football game. The UK's national team, the Three Lions, were facing off against Germany in a tense qualifier. The stadium was packed, the crowd roaring as the ball danced across the pitch. Sterling had just passed to Kane, who was eyeing the net, ready for a last-minute shot. My heart raced with the action unfolding on screen. This, at least, I could lose myself in. I lost track of time, watching the game, and stroking Pancakes' head. When the clock struck 8, I turned it off and headed straight for bed. The penthouse wasn't large, but it wasn't that small either. It was a decent size, with a small kitchen and living room, with a leather couch and flat-screen TV, which was the most I could afford on a coach's salary. When things were really tight, I picked up some extra coaching classes, the local community centre, which was a far cry from my earlier days as a pro athlete. I went into the bathroom. brushed my teeth, showered, fixed the floppy mess of black hair that refused to do anything but lay limp and listless across my forehead, and turned off the lights before heading straight to bed. Pancakes tried to sneak in beside me, but I gave him a sharp look, and he lowered his ears, slinking back onto the floor like he knew he was busted. "Nice try, buddy," I snorted. Pancakes, my Rottweiler, had a coat that looked like a jar of peanut butter drizzled with dark chocolate, rich, glossy, and smooth. His deep brown eyes gleamed with intelligence, always watching, always scheming, like he knew exactly how to charm his way into an extra treat or a belly rub. He lay sprawled at my feet, his soft snores filling the quiet room as I leaned back, thinking about tomorrow. It was going to be a big day. The team was getting a new player, some American student transferring in, and I was eager to see what he could bring to the table. So far, the teachers had sung his praises, but I never put too much stock in words. On the field, raw skill and work ethic spoke louder than any recommendation ever could. Our team, the Savage Falcons, wasn't just any football squad. We were an institution, one of the most elite and feared teams in the UK, known for our brutal training regimen, relentless work ethic, and an unyielding hunger for victory. We didn't just play, we dominated. Every match was a war, every practice a proving ground. Only the toughest survived, and only the best thrived. With our current winning streak, we weren't about to let some outsider slow us down. The new guy would have to prove himself fast, or he'd be eating turf before the week was out. Americans had their own way of playing football, their own flashy style, but that didn't always translate well to our game. For all I knew, this Xander, whatever his last name was, could be a total liability. Or maybe he'd surprise me. Either way, I'd find out soon enough. I exhaled, running a hand over Pancakes' broad head before settling in. No point in overthinking it. Tomorrow would come soon enough. With that thought, I closed my eyes and let sleep take me. The next morning, I walked into the coach's office. I bumped fists with a few of the guys as they talked crap to one another, their laughter following me through the hall, the usual pre-practice banter. I smirked, shaking my head before stepping inside and closing the door to my office. Jenkins was already there, his ochre skin gleaming under the fluorescent lights as he slapped my back in greeting. He was tall, dark-skinned, and built like a damn tank, muscular with sharp white teeth, a straight nose, and almond-shaped eyes that always looked like they were sizing someone up. "Hey, mate," he said with an easy grin. "Ready for the new guy today?" "Fresh meat! I love it!" I chuckled, grabbing my coach's hat and adjusting it before pulling it on. We wore the official university coach's gear, baby blue windbreakers with the team logo stitched on the chest, crisp white khakis, and matching white sneakers. I was on the thinner side, so the shorts sat a bit high on my waist, which was always mildly annoying, but not worth complaining about. Out of the 3 coaches on staff, I was the youngest, but with the most experience. That meant, more often than not, they defaulted to me when it came to making the tough calls. Not that I minded. It was the same as being a captain back in my playing days. Once you earned respect, people followed your lead. Jenkins stretched his arms over his head, rolling his shoulders as he gave me a look. "Think this American kid's got what it takes?" I smirked. Guess we're about to find out. We walked out together, heading straight to the field. "So, what happened with Millie? You've got a face like a slapped arse," Jenkins said with a smirk. "She dumped me. Even burnt my clothes for good measure. In the rubbish bin." "Oh, damn!" Jenkins laughed, covering his mouth with his fist. "I didn't know she had it in her." "Yeah, I shrugged, but it hurt. I don't know if I should beg to get her back or shake her hand. I was a mess back then. You still are. Jenkins nudged my shoulder. But I'm sorry, man. Melly was great. The best of you. I guess you can cherish the memories. Yeah. Say, what do you think about getting a pint after work? Help me drown my sorrows. Nah, man. Lorraine said she has plans with the kids, so I better not piss her off. You know how tight those two are, especially Melly. I don't want my stuff ending up in the rubbish bin. He clapped me on the back and jogged ahead. Yeah, I forced a laugh. Right. That was the problem with breaking up with someone you'd known for 10 years. All your friends were theirs too. It was a travesty. Did that mean we had to rotate when we spent time with our mates? God. I scrubbed a hand over my face and headed onto the field. Jenkins and I stepped onto the pitch, the crisp morning air carrying the familiar scent of damp grass and sweat. The lads were already warming up, passing the ball between them with sharp, precise movements. I blew my whistle, signaling them to pick up the pace. All right, boys, stretch it out properly. I don't want to see anyone pulling a hamstring on my watch, I called, hands on my hips. Craig and Rory, two of our best midfielders, grinned at me as they jogged past, muttering something under their breath that I was sure was about my coaching style. I ignored them. Jenkins grabbed a clipboard from the bench, scanning the day's training schedule. We running drills first or straight into practice? Drills, I said. Let's see who actually kept up with their conditioning over the weekend. Jenkins let out a low whistle. You're in a mood today. Before I could respond, the unmistakable sound of cleats against pavement caught my attention. A figure walked toward us, flanked by one of the university's athletic directors. The new guy had arrived, Xander something. He was taller than I expected, with broad shoulders and an easy gait, like he had all the time in the world. His black training shirt clung to his frame, emphasizing the kind of build you only got from years of serious training. His dark hair was a little too long for my liking, falling into his eyes as he took in the field with a calculating stare. The lads had noticed him too. A few had slowed their warm-ups, their eyes flicking between me and the new arrival. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Jenkins nudged me. Fresh meat. Let's see if he sinks or swims. I crossed my arms as the director gestured toward us, Xander following him over. Coach, the director greeted, nodding. This is Xander Rise, our newest addition. He's just transferred in from the States. Thought it'd be good for him to get started right away. Xander met my gaze head on, his expression unreadable. I kept my face neutral, nodding in acknowledgement. Rise, huh? You play much before this? His lips curled up at an angle, equal parts amusement and malice, as if he's already decided how this will end, and it won't be in your favor. Yeah, a bit. Jenkins scoffed under his breath, but I caught it. A bit. Right. I pulled out my whistle and twirled it around my fingers. We'll see about that. Get warmed up. You're late, and we don't do late here. Xander didn't hesitate. He nodded once and jogged onto the field without another word. Jenkins leaned in. Think he's any good? I exhaled, watching the way Xander moved, smooth, controlled, like he wasn't even trying yet. We'll find out soon enough. I blew the whistle, and Xander tore down the field like a man possessed, his strides devouring the ground with reckless confidence. He didn't pass, didn't even glance at his teammates, just charged straight through, weaving past defenders like they were training cones. Oi! Pass the bloody ball! Jenkins barked, but Xander wasn't listening. A defender lunged, Xander cut left so sharply, the poor bloke nearly ate turf. Another closed in, but Xander barely broke stride, shoving him off with a brutal shoulder check. 30 yards, 20, 10. With a final burst of speed, he launched the ball straight into the net. Silence. Then, the lads exploded, some whooping, others cursing. I just stood there, stunned, my whistle forgotten in the grass. Well, crap, I muttered. We might actually have a bloody prodigy. Or a menace, Jenkins hissed. He didn't pass once. This isn't hog the ball. Oi, that may be how the Americans do it, but over here we pass, yeah? Xander didn't look at him. He turned, and those black eyes fixated on me. I felt like a billiard ball had lodged in my chest instead of an entire bowling ball. A cool sweat broke out across my brow. Fragments of my argument with Millie fluttered across my mind, like bits of paper blown by the wind that I couldn't reach. She dumped me. Yes, but not before I told her. Not before I told her why things could never be serious between us. Why things had to remain casual. That the feelings I'd buried deep kept resurfacing, bubbling up with an unstoppable force. I felt like the breath had been punched out of me when his coal-like eyes landed on mine. He knew me, and I him. Images of him there in the dark flashed before my eyes, the hollow of his throat like a siren. My mouth sought the ridge of his Adam's apple, sealing my lips around it. He arched, raw and aching into me as I kissed his neck, silencing his moans. I followed the curve down like an arrow, guiding me back home. Fisting his hair, I took him, pounding him into the wall as the club lights swirled around us. He was the reason Millie dumped me. Because I had cheated on her with him. A guy I was never supposed to see again. A guy who was now one of the members on my team. A guy who was now one of the members on my team.
Chapter 2. Xander. My parents were screaming again. I flipped my hoodie over my head, wishing to God I could teleport out of here. The screaming match had gone on for the last hour, and with my mum screeching higher and higher, it was loud enough to burst my eardrums. I headed outside for a smoke, the hickeys on my neck still burning from my hookup last night. God, that man had been sinful. Piercing green eyes that dug straight into my soul. His black stubble was neatly trimmed, and his hair was long, framing his face perfectly. His accent had gone straight to my loins, making me throb. Scottish? Irish? Who knew? I felt my face go hot with the memory. It was the first time since I'd come to London that I decided to hit the club. It wasn't anything like American clubs. I kept ordering the wrong drinks. Lager meant beer or whatever, and I kept screwing it up. But this guy had seen me at the bar and helped me order, helped me get drunk, helped me get laid. Little did he know that it had been my first time, but he'd gone slow and was oddly attentive. The club was so dark I hadn't been able to see his face clearly, but once I did, I realized who he was. The second I got home, I looked him up almost immediately. It was Marcus Hayes, the Marcus Hayes, the striker. I couldn't believe it. The man who'd shared that wild night with me was one of the biggest names in football. He played for the London Royals, one of the most renowned teams in the world. Known for his blistering speed and lethal left foot, Marcus had scored over 150 goals in his career, making him the team's top scorer for the last 5 years. He was famous for his incredible stamina, always outpacing defenders and making runs that seemed to defy logic. His goal conversion rate was consistently above 30%, and he'd won 3 Premier League titles with the Royals, as well as 2 FA Cups and a Champions League. He was a beast on the field, and apparently off it too. I was obsessed. And then I learned he was going to be my coach, and the thing inside me grew. "Hey," a voice said, snapping me out of my thoughts. I turned to see my mom poking her head out of the screen door. "Do you want some fish and chips?" Her eyes were puffy and bright red, tear tracks on her plump cheeks. We shared the same auburn hair, but hers was cut short around her round face. She didn't look 35 at all, but much older, maybe inching to 40. Nah, I'm good, I lied. I wasn't in the mood to eat, especially after the blowout my parents had. My dad was back in America, insisting he stop by to see me, cursing her for moving an ocean away, and cursing me for leaving with her. They divorced last year, but Dad still called regularly, and Mom picked up. I didn't understand it. Why they bothered talking to each other if it just erupted into a screaming match. But Mom had told me once that she was better off sticking to the devil she knew. Okay, I'm off then. She jerked her head toward the bedroom and I nodded. Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. Yeah, big day. My thoughts drifted back to Marcus, the way his hand felt around my throat, the heat of breath against my ear. Do you like it? He'd asked huskily, licking the sweat off my skin. Do you like it? Yes, I had gasped out, arching into him. There was no way I could go to practice tomorrow without thinking of it, of him. I finished off my cigarette and went to my room, booting my computer and looking at old pictures of Marcus Hayes. His black wavy hair was tousled in some photos, slicked back in others, but it always looked effortlessly perfect. Those dark forest green eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, intense and unwavering. His jaw, framed by a neatly trimmed beard, made him look both rugged and refined, like he belonged on the cover of a magazine as much as he did on the pitch. I scrolled down. There were newer pictures, shots of him mid-game, his body in motion, lean, powerful, every muscle defined as he sprinted down the field. His jersey clung to him, drenched in sweat, his expression locked in fierce concentration. The heat crept up my neck again. I swallowed hard, shifting in my seat. Wikipedia said he was 30, not that much older than me. Just 10 years. That wasn't bad, right? But it wasn't his age that had my stomach twisting. It was the fact that I'd had him. And now, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I had followed his career almost religiously from the start, even when my parents started fighting and never stopped, even when the house felt like a war zone and I wanted to disappear. He had been the one I watched, the one I wanted to play like, the one I dreamed of being. Marcus Hayes was everything I wasn't, confident, disciplined, untouchable. While my life crumbled around me, he built his into something legendary. He made the impossible look easy, every goal, every move on the field a lesson in perfection. I had copied him, studied him, worshipped him. And last night, I had touched him, had him. Tomorrow, I had to make a good impression. He had to see me, not just as some kid he picked up at a club, not just as another mistake. He had to see me as his equal. The second I arrived, I knew he recognized me, and it wasn't until I saw his brow pull into a furious frown that I realized how much. Coach Hayes was proficient. I didn't expect anything less. But it was the other players that I felt were solely beneath him. They play with a mediocrity I hadn't seen in a long time. Most of the guys there just coasting from their previous wins. To me, soccer wasn't a hobby. It was the one thing that kept me alive. My eyes narrowed into slits as I tracked Craig and Rory, the two midfielders who were both watching me with guarded expressions, assessing, deciding whether to challenge me or dismiss me. A nudge at my elbow made me tense. Hey, mate? I turned to find a shock of red hair and deep mocha eyes staring straight through me. The guy grinned. I'm Archie. This is Cam and Dillian. Nice to see we've actually got some talent here. You American? I clenched my jaw. Yeah. Archie's grin widened. Figured, you've got that look about you. What look? I shot back, crossing my arms. Cam, a tall center back with a mop of dark curls, chuckled. That ready to prove something? Look, Americans always come in thinking they have to work twice as hard. I narrowed my eyes, but before I could respond, Dillian, lean, wiry, with sharp cheekbones and a cocky smirk, cut in. He's not wrong, mate. And trust me, you'll have to. Coach Hayes doesn't play favorites. My stomach twisted. Yeah, I knew that already. He hadn't even looked at me since I'd stepped onto the field. Rory and Craig were still watching me, their expressions unreadable. I recognized a few others, too. Jack, the quick-footed left-winger with an easygoing stride, and Hugo, a brick wall of a goalkeeper who had barely spoken a word since I got here. They were all sizing me up, same as I was them. Archie nudged me again. Don't let him psych you out. Just play like you've got something to prove. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I do. And I wasn't leaving this field until Marcus Hayes knew it. Shall we go again? Sure, man. He patted my back, and we jogged onto the field. The whistle blew and I took off, hurtling after the ball like my life depended on it. Was he watching me? Was he looking at me? My heart pounded in my chest. I barely passed the ball, and within seconds, Coach Jenkins, or something, was screaming at me. But did Marcus notice? The whistle blew again. Time out. The game paused as Coach Hayes marched toward me. The world shrank, narrowing to just him. My breath roared in my ears as he closed the distance, stopping 3 feet away. His eyes, so bright, so green they were almost iridescent, locked onto mine. My office, now. To anyone else, it sounded like a reprimand, his accent cutting sharp, words clipped and commanding. To me, they were a song, tantalizing, wrapping around me, compelling me to follow. I grabbed my stuff and followed several paces behind him, my eyes tracing the way his muscles flexed beneath his windbreaker. He was taller than I remembered, lean but solid, the kind of strength built from years of pushing his body to the limit. His hat made his black hair curl upward at the edges, and the pale blue of his jacket only emphasized how sharp, how capable he looked. I swallowed hard as icy fingers crawled up my neck. The ghost of a memory, him pressing against me, his breath hot on my skin. When we reached his office, he pushed the door open but didn't close it all the way. A deliberate choice. He didn't sit, so neither did I. This meeting would be short. I could already tell. So, you didn't like to share in America, eh? His voice was smooth, edged with that sharp accent that sent a shiver straight down my spine. But it wasn't just his voice that had me caught. It was his lips. Plump like a rose petal, soft yet firm. The way they shaped his words, how the corners of his mouth barely twitched, like he was holding something back. A reprimand? A smirk? A memory? I dragged my gaze away, focusing on the tense line of his jaw instead. My throat felt dry. I play to win, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms. His windbreaker shifted, stretching across his chest. You play like a selfish prick. That should have pissed me off. Maybe it did, but all I could think about was the way his mouth had felt against mine, and how badly I wanted to feel it again. I didn't come here to babysit egos, Marcus continued, but I'll give you one thing. You've got the passion. The rest, though, it's going to take work. I'll work for it, I said. I'm not some guy who shows up for the fun of it. Marcus didn't reply right away. He just stared at me, and for a moment, I wondered if he was seeing right through me. Good, but you can't hog the ball like that. You've got teammates for a reason. Next time you're on the field, pass it. Don't try to do it all yourself. That's why we have practice to figure out the play and make it work against the team. If you act on your own, you're putting yourself and the rest of the team at risk. Got it? Yeah. I licked my dry lips and noticed he tracked the motion. Noted. Where are you from in America? Ohio, I deadpanned. It was a lie. I was actually from New England, but he wouldn't know that until he looked at my file. And you? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Edinburgh. He smiled, but it was tight. Well, I look forward to working with you and seeing what other talents you have. That's not why you called me in here. His gaze snapped to mine. It was sharp like freshly cut moss. You what? You heard me. I shoved my hands deeper into my black shorts, keeping my gaze on him. That's not what you called me here for. Jesus Christ, kid. He rounded the desk and quickly closed the door. Are you taking the piss? I cocked my head. No. Marcus's jaw jumped, and he braced his hands against the desk. Look, I owe you an explanation and an apology. I was wrecked that night. Drunk out of my freaking mind, all right? It won't happen again. I'm sorry, and if you'd like to switch teams, we can do that. I'm ashamed of myself, okay? He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling, but there was something worse in his eyes. Fear. Like he thought that this coming out would ruin him, that I would ruin him. I felt a sense of power come over me then, my body inflating with confidence. He was vulnerable. exposed in a way I hadn't expected. He was teetering on the edge, and I could feel it. Do you regret it? More people were coming in now, their voices getting louder and louder around us. Practice was over, and the team was heading back to the locker rooms. We stared at each other, and I wasn't leaving until I knew the answer. You what? Marcus demanded. Do you regret it? Marcus stared at me. Yes. I wanted to laugh. I wanted the sound to crawl out of me, but kept it back. He thought of it as a mistake, but I wouldn't let him. If it's all right with you, lad, I'd rather not speak about it. And what if I want to speak about it? Marcus exhaled. You're killing me, mate. He looked back to the window where the team was filing in. Look, if you feel uncomfortable in any way, let me know, and I can have you switch teams immediately. Do you feel uncomfortable? I turned the question back on him. You know what I mean, Marcus huffed. Actually, I don't. I was being difficult, but I didn't care. He wouldn't weasel out of this so quickly. Sure, to some degree, maybe it had been a mistake, but one that I would willingly make again. A sharp knock on the door tore us out of our conversation, and Jenkins was letting himself in. Have you finished? Jenkins asked. Just about done. I'll see you tomorrow, Xander, Marcus said pointedly to me. I shrugged and walked out the door, closing it shut behind me. The team was talking as they got undressed, and I did the same, ignoring the bizarre looks I got when I took off my clothes. Hey, mate, what happened to your back? Archie asked. Did you get crucified in your sleep or something? I was mugged. Another lie, but somewhat of a half-lie. I wasn't mugged per se, but I was robbed by members of my soccer team, no less. It was why my mum had wanted to move back to England in the first place, bad memories and all that. But I wasn't going to let these guys know that. I just played it off, shrugging as if it wasn't a big deal. The last thing I needed was their pity, or worse, their judgment. They all exchanged uneasy glances, but nobody pushed further. Archie gave me a nod, his eyes flicking to my back, then back to my face. Right, well, if you need any help, let us know, yeah? He said. The rest of the guys were already chatting about the upcoming match, but I could feel their eyes lingering on me, some filled with curiosity, others with concern. I tried to ignore it, not wanting to give anyone the satisfaction of thinking I was vulnerable. As I finished changing, I took a deep breath, trying to block out everything except the next training session. Tomorrow, I'd be better. I had to be. There was no room for weakness. Not now. Not here. Not with Marcus Hayes watching. I walked home to my crappy apartment where I live with my mum. I used my key to get into the door, but it didn't budge. I had to shoulder check it to get inside. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink, a newspaper scattered on the floor, and smoke filtered in the morning air. I dumped last night's dinner into the trash can, tidied up before Mum got back from work, and headed straight to my room. Flicking on the lights, posters of Marcus Hayes covered every wall, some of him triumphant as he scored, others of him on his knees in defeat. I touched the nearest one to the bed, tracing it with my fingers. It was nothing compared to him in person, up close. My breath stuttered out of me. Do you regret it? Yes. But the pulse in his neck had throbbed. A lie? Perhaps. How could you regret 2 rounds? And if we'd gone back to his place, I'm sure they would have been more. He was drunk, yes, but not too drunk not to recognize me, or pat my ass when it was over, saying we should meet again. People will do anything for self-preservation. It was something I learned a long time ago. He didn't regret it. As I'd mentioned earlier, he was already teetering at the edge, and it wouldn't take much more than a slight push to watch him tumble over. I went to bed, my hands sliding into my shorts. I brought myself to completion, thinking of only him. I woke the next day to shouting, my mom once again trying to win the screaming match against my dad. It was impossible. I dragged myself out of bed and headed to Ashford University for my classes. The Savage Falcons soccer team played for the school, and despite being surrounded by some of the best players, I was only there for one thing: soccer. I was studying accounting just because my father wanted me to. That was why I was allowed to go to Ashford, mainly for soccer, but my dad wouldn't allow it unless I studied accounting too. A few of the guys from the team were in some of my classes. They tried to call me over, but I stayed on the opposite side of the room. Friends were a distraction I didn't need. I focused on watching old videos of Marcus until the lecture started. Once it was over, I headed straight to the field to warm up before everyone else arrived. Overachiever, eh? Archie called out when he spotted me. Just want to play, that's all. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so uptight before. Archie laughed. Damn, do you come with an off switch? Does your mouth? Archie stared at me, shock crossing his face at the insult. He raised his hands in surrender. Just trying to be funny, mate. Don't get your knickers in a twist. I shot him a look before turning back to my warm-up, my mind already focused on the game. The whistle blew, and I looked to the sidelines to see Marcus there with Coach Jenkins. He wore a black top today and a white baseball cap backward, his arms crossed over his chest. Gather around, Coach Jenkins barked. We all jogged to the huddle, some of the guys exchanging words as we got into position. All right, Coach began. We've got Xander joining our team. I trust you all to make him feel welcomed. We're going to play a 4-3-3 today. Center backs, keep tight. Midfield, control the game, push it forward. Wingers, make those runs, stretch their defense. We press high, no mercy. I nodded along, but I was already thinking about something else, something bigger. As the ball was passed into play, I was ready. Everyone was moving in sync, but I wasn't. I didn't follow the game plan. Instead, I ran toward the ball and took it with me, ignoring the open man, ignoring the fact that I was supposed to pass. This was my moment. The ball rolled at my feet, and I could hear the calls for me to release it, but I didn't. I dribbled past one, then another. I faked left, took it right, and by the time I reached the edge of the box, my heart was pounding. Marcus was watching. I knew it, and I wasn't about to let him down now. I faked another defender, pulled it back, and shot. The ball rocketed into the net, a perfect strike, top corner. I heard the collective groan of the team, but I didn't care. Nice shot, Archie called, his voice sarcastic, but I wasn't listening. I turned toward the sidelines, catching Marcus's eye, watching him nod approvingly. It wasn't just about the goal. It was about proving something, about showing him I was worth noticing. I had done it, and I wasn't done yet. Xander, Marcus called me over to him. What the hell was that? Why didn't you pass? You weren't watching, I spat, the words coming out harsher than I meant. But it was true. He hadn't seen it. He hadn't seen any of it. Marcus looked taken aback, his lips pressing into a thin line. Listen here. Coach Jenkins jumped in. We are your coaches. And if you can't follow the game plan, then maybe you should find another team. I won't put up with someone hogging the ball. I didn't even look at Jenkins. My focus stayed solely on Marcus. My eyes locked with his. Were you watching? I demanded. Marcus's breath hitched. The air shifted as the team leaned in, sensing a fight. Waiting for a fight. Of course, I was watching, Marcus stammered, caught off guard. You weren't, I hissed. Then I pointed at Archie. He's leaving himself wide open, standing there like a statue. You really expect me to pass it to him when he's not even trying? I turned to face the rest of the team. Craig, you're too slow. Your reaction time's garbage. Rory, you just want the easy pass instead of making an actual play. You're all too busy watching the ball instead of positioning yourselves properly. How do you expect me to pass it when you're not even moving? The silence stretched. Marcus and Jenkins just stared at me, their mouths hanging open. I'm not going to pass if no one's in the right position. I'm not a babysitter. If you want me to play with you, do better. Marcus's jaw tightened, but I could see something shift in his eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a little respect. But definitely something new. You snotty little tosser. Enough, Jenkins. Marcus raised a hand, silencing him. I get it, Xander. We'll work on it. For now, I need you to follow the play, all right? Then we can work on the holes. I gave a curt nod, not breaking my gaze. I wasn't done proving myself yet, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let them forget that. What happened between us wasn't a mistake, and Marcus would realize it, sooner or later.
Chapter 3. Marcus. I'm screwed. I'll be sacked for sure. My heart hammered like a fist on a door, as I grabbed my stuff and darted out of the building. I barely had time to wave to Jenkins and the others as I jumped into my pickup truck and peeled out of there, shredding rubber. What the hell was that? Was this guy winding me up? Was it some sick, twisted joke? I couldn't actually believe the nerve of the brat to come inside my place of work and actually accuse me of sleeping with him and enjoying it. Of course I enjoyed it. I would have been mad not to. Xander Rise was the amalgamation of all my hottest fantasies, of everything I'd kept hidden all those years I'd been with Millie. I'd gone to the club that night to blow off some steam, to remind myself that yes, I loved Millie, but I wasn't in love with her, and finally come to terms with the sexuality crisis I was facing at the ripe age of 30. I didn't plan to sleep with him. Things just happened. One minute, I saw a hot guy walk into the club, hoodie over his head, while he leaned against the wall in the back. The next thing I knew, I was kissing him, dragging him forward by the neck. The entire thing had been freaking hot. I hadn't been sure what to expect, but we managed to find an excluded area, and soon I was peppering kisses all over his corded thighs, sucking a bruise into his skin before slicking myself up and entering him in one smooth glide. He'd tense at first, legs trembling, his feet digging in to hold his ground. I remembered fisting his hair, yanking it back and riding him like a prized mare. It finished way too soon, and then we were at it again. We went 2 rounds before I realized with shrinking horror that I had cheated on Millie, the woman I had spent the last 10 years of my life with, for a man, a college student. Naturally, I fled, like the bastard coward that I was. I arrived home quickly, dumping my duffel bag onto the floor and headed straight to the couch. I lay flat on my back on the sofa, covering my eyes with one hand, suddenly unable to bear the sight of the world around me. I wanted to be in the dark. I wanted the pure, infinite nothingness. But Pancakes had other ideas and came up to start licking my dangling hand. I could barely breathe, the bass line of my heart thumping in my ears. Xander was cocky. The idiot thought he knew better, and the worst part was that he did. What he said today about the team, he wasn't wrong. I had noticed those holes a few months ago, but Jenkins and I were content to let things play out, hoping that the Savage Falcons would fall into their usual rhythm, since they just returned from summer holidays. But with Xander playing, things were starting to feel off balance. And Xander, he was stunning. His hair was like warm chestnuts, tousled, and caught the light with every movement. Xander's eyes were portals to summer nights long gone. His lips were thin, like one long line, and his nose was tall and proud. He had the type of nose that seemed sculpted by someone who knew exactly what beauty was. His features were acute, yet soft, a contradiction that only made him more intriguing. Every glance he gave was like an invitation to understand him, and every moment spent in his presence felt like a breath held too long. That night had been precious, devastating too. I found that my guilt had been too much, too profound, and the second I finished with Xander, I immediately went to Millie's house to speak to her. We talked in circles all night, until finally, in the wee hours of the morning, things erupted and she threw me out. We were done. 10 years of my life obliterated in one night, over one boy, a boy that was now a part of my team, and I was his coach. God, this sounded like a horror story. Pancakes whined softly, and I cracked an eye open to stare at him. What? Gonna blame me too? I grumbled, then hauled myself off the bed and went to refill his doggy bowl. I turned on the TV, the football highlights blaring across the screen, but my mind wasn't really on the game. Xander's words kept replaying, looping over and over like a broken record. The kid was a stubborn arse, but everything he said wasn't wrong. We were coasting, just going through the motions. We needed to step it up, or we'd be left behind. I leaned back against the couch, rubbing my face. I could feel the anxiety of it all smothering me. That's when the idea hit me. Waves. If we could think of it like waves, always moving, always crashing forward, never stagnant. It'd take work, sure, but I could make this team move like a force of nature, just like the tide. No hesitation, no stopping, only forward. Pancakes whined again, probably wanting to go outside, but I ignored him for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the TV. The idea was there. Now I just had to make it happen. And Xander, he was going to be the key to all of it. All right, listen up. I blew my whistle, and the team huddled in, waiting for me to speak. Xander stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable, like usual. The rest of the lads were keen to hear what I had to say. Xander was taller than I thought, almost my height but leaner. I couldn't help but notice, but I pushed the thought aside. Focus. I cleared my throat and laid it out. We're going to tighten up our passing game. No more hogging the ball, lads. We need to shift it quicker. 1-2 touches, quick plays, and we've got to be more clinical in front of goal. Xander made a good point. If we're not moving the ball, we're not giving ourselves a chance. And we'll keep the width. No bottling it up. Spread out, keep it wide, and use the whole pitch. I shot a look around at the players. We're not bloody amateurs, all right? We're playing smart today, or we'll be a bloody disgrace. A few heads nodded. I could tell some of the lads were still unsure, but this was the only way forward. The only way we'd get our game sorted. Let's play! I blew my whistle again, and the team scattered onto the field. My eyes instinctively followed them, but my gaze kept drifting back to Xander. He was already moving, quick and focused. I couldn't help but notice his footwork, fluid, like he'd been practicing for years. His feet tapped the ball lightly, just enough to control it. Then he weaved through the players. He passed it perfectly to Archie, and in the blink of an eye, he shifted direction, pulling off a slick move I hadn't seen in a long time. It was my move, the one I'd used to dominate the field when I was at my peak. A quick, sharp feint to the left. Then he accelerated, cutting through 2 defenders like they weren't even there. Before I even had time to register what was happening, he slotted the ball into the back of the net. The world seemed to freeze for a second, like an elastic band stretched too tight, then snapped. My breath caught in my chest. How did he know that move? A weird, uneasy feeling twisted in my stomach. I couldn't shake it. He was good, better than I'd expected, and that strange, jealous fury bubbled up inside me. He's bloody good, Jenkins said, staring at the field in disbelief. Natural, I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. I couldn't stop watching Xander. His footwork, his control of the ball, it was like looking at myself from years ago. The kid was a force. But that move, that was my move. How did he pull it off so seamlessly? Kinda reminds me of you, Jenkins laughed, nudging my shoulder. The ball was passed to Archie, who quickly sent it to Cam, then Dillian, and finally to Craig. He took the shot and scored, throwing Xander a scathing look as he celebrated. Tosser, Craig muttered, causing the other guys to laugh. Christ, this wouldn't be good. The rest of the team started to team up against Xander, despite the fact we were supposed to be running a play. I was about to blow my whistle to stop it, but Jenkins stopped me. Let the boys have a bit of fun, he chuckled. But there wasn't anything remotely fun about it. Craig was out for blood. I watched as he got more aggressive, trying to get the ball from Xander. He was closing in, and the rest of the guys followed suit, crowding Xander, making him dodge left and right. I could tell Xander was getting frustrated as they pushed harder. They moved like a wall, cutting him off at every turn. Craig lunged forward and nearly tripped Xander. Xander tried to dodge Craig, but this time, Craig's tackle was too quick. Xander tripped over his own feet and crashed to the ground, hard. The rest of the team snickered, but I didn't find it funny. I blew my whistle. "Foul!" I growled, stepping forward to break them up. "That's totally out of order!" I grabbed Xander's arm, helping him up. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he snapped, jerking his arm out of my grip. "All right, time's up. Get to the locker rooms to change," Jenkins called out from the sidelines. The guys started grumbling but followed orders, heading off to the locker rooms while Xander took off in the other direction. "You go after him. I'll see about the other guys," Jenkins said, already heading back to the locker rooms. Great. That left me alone with a fuming Xander. I braced my hands on my hips and walked toward him, hoping he'd cooled down enough. "Oi," I said, "take a breath." "Did you see it?" He cut me off, pacing. "My move just now. Did you see it?" I felt my hackles rise. Why did he want me to see it? Why did he want me to watch him? Was he deliberately taking my moves, testing me, waiting for my reaction? "Yes, why?" "What did you think?" he asked earnestly. "It was fine. Look, Xander, those guys have played together for the past 3 years and have won. We're one of the best teams out there, and most of them are looking to go pro." "So," Xander cut in rudely, "what did you think?" There was a strange desperation in his tone that made my stomach flip. What did I think? His eyes were wild, locked onto mine with a rabid savagery I had never known. My breath trickled out of me, my lips parting. "You stole my move." Xander stepped forward, closing the distance between us, his breath hot and searing against my cheek. "Yeah, I took it. That means it's mine now. What are you going to do about it?" Something wet and velvety darted out, tracing the shell of my ear. I recoiled sharply, my skin burning where he'd licked me. A jolt shot through me, blistering and hot. "You what?" Xander was already backing away, smug. "If I were a mistake, you wouldn't be standing there, breathless, waiting for more." "Hey!" I grabbed his bicep, yanking him back to me. "Enough!" "No, I don't think so," Xander replied, lifting his chin. "Not nearly enough." "What the hell is your problem? You want to deny me. Deny us. I won't let you." Us? This guy was certifiable. He was the one-night stand from hell. "You're absolutely barmy!" Am I? Or is that I won't let you treat me like dirt? Treat me like it meant nothing when it did. Treat me like something you stepped in. I know you, Marcus Hayes. I've seen you. "Listen here, mate," I spat the word. "I don't know what type of game you're playing at, but it ends now." Who says I'm playing? Xander wiggled out of my grip and walked away. I stood there, stunned, my heart racing like 1,000 tiny feet sprinting inside me. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I stayed frozen for several minutes, trying to gather my thoughts before finally heading back to the locker rooms. Xander disappeared into the showers, and I went straight to my office. I was shaking. Adrenaline roared through me, thundering in my veins. He looked at me like he wanted something, like he wanted me. My attention, my eyes, my body. That's just it. Xander wants. It was visceral, all-consuming, daring me to do something about it. Like I was the only one who can quench this thirst. I was still reeling when Jenkins walked into the room. "You good, mate? Don't tell me that kid got under your skin." "Nah," I forced a smile. "You all right?" "I'm good. Now stop faffing about. Let's grab that pint you've been moaning about." A loud commotion in the locker room cut him off. I was on my feet in seconds. "Hey, knock it off!" "Cool it," Jenkins barked, backing me up as we separated the boys. He shoved Craig back with a firm hand to the chest. "What the bloody hell's gotten into you?" "The guy's a wanker. All he does is talk about how he's the best. Well, newsflash, this is a team effort. Bro, I can't have him mucking up my chances to go pro." A chorus of agreement followed from the other guys. "Clear out of here!" Jenkins hissed, and the team started filing out, still grumbling, all except for Xander. He stood there, still dripping wet from his shower, his hair falling in damp ringlets across his forehead, droplets trailing down his skin like falling rain. His towel was clutched in a white-knuckled grip, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. Jenkins snorted and rolled his eyes. "I'm out of here," he said, grabbing his stuff and waving me off. "Good luck, mate." "Yeah," I muttered, keeping my voice low. I turned back to Xander. "All right, get dressed and—" His lips were on mine before I could think. He stumbled forward, forcing me back, and I staggered hard, losing my footing and slamming against the lockers. Then he was on me, his mouth harsh and demanding, his lips prying mine apart. It was uncoordinated, filthy, and very wrong. I gasped, lips parting, letting him in, and he was kissing me with everything he had, and I was letting him. "No!" I wrenched free, gripping his shoulders, but Xander leaned forward again, trying to claim me once more. "Xander! Stop!" I shoved him off, not hard, but enough to let him know to stop. He stilled, breathing hard, his long, damp hair framing his face. His lips were plump and red, slightly swollen from our kisses. I scrambled to stand up, looking around to make sure nobody had seen. I needed to get the hell out of here. I inched toward the door, and Xander watched me, his eyes hooded, his gaze rabid. I could see the outline of him in the towel, filling with need. It wouldn't take much to sink to my knees, peel off that towel, and I fled. Snatching my duffel bag, I sprinted out the door. This was madness, complete and utter madness. And it wasn't until I got to my car that I had realized I had kissed him back. I was just about to start the car when my phone started buzzing and Millie's name popped up on the screen. Buzzing, and Millie's name popped up on the screen.
Chapter 4. Xander. I hated my parents, and trust me, I wasn't saying that for fun. I'm not some entitled, spoiled brat throwing a tantrum. I genuinely hated them. They fought constantly, but somehow they were too toxic to actually let go of each other. When it was like watching two raccoons fight over a garbage can, except the garbage was me. I was always stuck in the middle, yanked back and forth like an emotional tug-of-war rope. And whenever the mood struck, ding, ding, I'd be used as leverage. Like a shiny prize neither of them actually wanted, but refused to let the other have. Which was exactly how I ended up here, standing at the airport, waiting for my dad to arrive. Lucky me. He was making one of his rare, impromptu visits to spend time with me. Whatever that means. I was only staying with Mom because of university, and after that I'd be gone, off to play pro. I didn't really care what my dad thought since he was hardly ever around, except to scream at my mom. I cleared my throat, rolling on the balls of my feet while my mum paced angrily beside me. Then a suit jacket, a mop of familiar brown hair graying at the temples, emerged from the terminal. My dad was a head shorter than me, and had worked as an accountant for the past 30 years at some hotshot company called Sterling and Wolf Financial Group. It sounded fancy, but as far as I could tell, all they did was move numbers around and make rich people even richer. I'd only taken the accounting courses because he threatened to take me out of soccer if I didn't. "There's my boy," my dad said, making a beeline for me. We hugged, but I pulled away as quickly as I could. "Leah," he clipped. "Daryl," my mum said back, her tone equally as distasteful. "I'll take you to your hotel, and you can get settled in. Why not back to your apartment? I want to make sure my son is staying in a reasonable environment." "Reasonable? What's that supposed to mean?" "You know damn well what it means. I want to know my alimony is being put to good use." "God, you're such a prick, Daryl. When are you going to grow up?" "When you grow up." I tuned the rest of it out, ignoring the curious heads turning in our direction. They did this everywhere we went, and a large part of me wondered why they got divorced in the first place, if they liked tormenting each other so much. Eventually, we decided to go back to the apartment, where I knew my dad would find some excuse to stay, since hotels in the UK were too expensive, and then I'd get front row seats to their bickering. They fought from the airport all the way back to Mum's apartment. They fought while Mum made dinner and afterward. But when nighttime came, my dad seemed to remember why he'd come here in the first place. "Hey, Xander, why don't we go for a walk? It's a bit stuffy in here." "Stuffy?" Mum shot back. "What's that supposed to mean?" I was out the door before she finished that sentence. Eventually, Dad came out too, not without having the last word, of course. "So," he started, rocking back on his heels. "How's school?" I resisted the urge to groan. Classic Dad. Get me alone. And suddenly, he's all about the heartfelt father-son bonding. "It's fine," I said, kicking at a loose pebble. "Just fine?" He glanced at me. "I thought you loved soccer. How's the team?" I hesitated, my jaw working. The team. Yeah, that was a bit of a mess. Aside from pissing off half the team and starting a fight with one of my players, I was having a fling with my coach in the side. I was so desperate to get any part of him that I actually kissed him, in broad daylight in the locker room. How pathetic was that? "It's complicated." Dad hummed like he was expecting me to elaborate. I didn't. We reached the park at the end of the street, and he motioned for me to sit on one of the benches. I didn't want to, but I figured if I kept standing, he'd just keep prodding me with questions. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, son, I know things aren't exactly ideal between me and your mom, but Are you going to give me some speech about how you both love me very much and just want what's best for me?" Dad blinked. "Well, yeah. Save it," I muttered, leaning back on the bench. "I've heard it before." Silence stretched between us. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and a car rumbled past. "All right, no speeches, but I do want to know how you're really doing, not just fine." I froze, swallowing thickly. Part of me wanted to tell him everything, about the team, about Craig, about other things I didn't even want to admit to myself. But what was the point? He'd just nod, say something generic like, "That's rough, kid," and go back to pretending my life was normal. What if I didn't want to study accounting? What if I wanted to play pro soccer and settle down with Marcus? So instead, I said, "I'm managing." "Girl trouble?" He laughed. "Trust me, I know how it is." I fought the urge to cringe. We never talked about this stuff. I guess Dad and Mum assumed I was straight, and I never gave them pause to think otherwise. But what if I did? What if I told him I'd met my idol? And I wanted him so bad I could barely breathe most days. "Yeah, you could say that." My dad's face lit up, his bushy brows climbing his forehead. "Well, don't leave it there. How'd you meet her? What's happened?" "At a club." My face grew hot. "We hooked up." "And," my dad probed, "did she ghost you, as the kids say?" Something like that. I turned away, staring at the brick building across the street. I don't get girls. She just acted like it was a mistake, like it meant nothing. "Yeah, women usually do that. Have you tried talking to her about it?" "She'd shut me down." I leaned forward so that my elbows were on my thighs. She's older, but cool, sophisticated, I think. I don't want to be treated like a mistake, like a lapse in judgment. I want to be seen, to be heard and not dismissed. Dad exhaled through his nose, rubbing his jaw in thought. Listen, son, I know I don't always say the right thing, but I do know one thing about relationships. I glanced at him, waiting. If someone makes you feel like a mistake, that's on them, not you. I swallowed around the knot in my throat. I've been there, you know? You think you found something real, but the other person, well, they've already decided what it was before you even had a chance to prove otherwise. He huffed a laugh, shaking his head. It's like showing up to a game thinking you've got a shot at winning, but the ref's already called the match. I frowned. So what? You just let it go? No, he said firmly. You make a choice. Either you fight for them, make them see what they're missing, or you walk away with your head held high, knowing you're worth more than a regret. I stared at the ground, my chest tight. Look, I don't know this girl, but if she's as smart and sophisticated as you say, she should be able to recognize when she's got something good standing right in front of her. And if she doesn't, Dad shrugged, then she's a bloody idiot. I let out a small chuckle, more out of relief than amusement. Whatever happens, just don't let someone else decide your worth. That's not their right. He clapped me on the back. I nodded slowly, his words sinking in. Maybe he was right. Maybe I could fight for what I wanted. Or maybe I should stop chasing someone who wasn't willing to meet me halfway. I kept to myself the next few days, ignoring Craig and Archie's attempts at conversation. I needed to get my head on straight. Coach Jenkins treated me with disdain as always. To him, I was nothing more than the cocky American trying to show off. But Coach Hayes was different. Marcus was different. He didn't hound me for answers about our last locker room kiss. In fact, he was resolute in ignoring anything that ever happened between us, which should have been okay by me for the time being. But every time I looked at him, my heart lurched. It was stupid. But I had idolized Marcus Hayes for as long as I could remember. And when we met at the club, I thought it was fate. After practice, I gathered my stuff, ready to walk out, but Archie stopped me. Hey mate, are you free this weekend? Not sure yet. Why? Coach Jenkins usually has a pool party at his house before the first game of the season. His wife cooks, and he barbecues. It's usually a lot of fun. Why don't you come around? We can officially congratulate you on making the team. Craig scoffed somewhere in the distance, and I just realized others were listening. Coach Jenkins and Coach Hayes will be there? Yeah, and his girlfriend Melly, she's hot as sin. Girlfriend? It hit me like a penalty kick to the gut, hard and fast. No way to brace for it. My heart lurched, like I just missed an open goal in the final minute of a match, the ball sailing right past me, the net left empty. I was breathless and stunned, unable to move. Girlfriend? No wonder he'd acted so cagey. No wonder he outright rejected me before even getting a chance to really know me. My stomach twisted into a knot and I forced a smile. Sure, yeah, I'll be there. Cheers. Archie patted me on the back. See you there, mate. He walked away, his red hair like a burning flame as he disappeared into the showers. I scrolled through picture after picture, my fingers moving almost automatically, the screen blurring as I went from one social media post to the next. Every photo of her seemed perfect. Marcus and Melly at some charity event, holding hands, looking so damn happy. I couldn't stop scrolling. It was like I was searching for some sort of answer, some explanation that would make this make sense, but it only dug the hole deeper. There were endless photos of them together, smiling at the camera, laughing, the chemistry between them practically jumping off the screen. My stomach twisted into knots every time I saw another image of them, like a punch to the gut. This was the woman Marcus was with, and here I was, some idiot thinking that maybe, just maybe, there was something between us. Idiot, I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. It wasn't even just the fact that Marcus had a girlfriend. It was that I hadn't seen it coming. He'd never mentioned her, not even once. What had I thought was going on? I couldn't even tell if it had been a one-sided thing on my part or if he was just playing a game the whole time. I slammed my hand against the wall, frustrated, my heart pounding in my chest. This was stupid. I was being stupid. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly, forcing the tears to stay where they were. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not over this. But deep down, something in my chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. I pushed myself off the wall and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Whatever. I'd go to that damn party, and Marcus could look me in the eye and explain why, after everything that happened. After he took my virginity, he never once bothered to mention he had a girlfriend. Kendrick Lamar blared through the speakers as I entered through the back door of the house. Craig and Rory were in the water, trying to dunk each other while the other guys sat in the shallow end, drinking beers and chatting. The backyard was spacious, large enough that some of the other guys had started a small soccer game in the corner, all of them wearing their swim trunks. I was in my black clothing, not bothering to change since I didn't plan on staying long. Coach Jenkins was by the grill, drinking a beer and flipping steaks, while a short, black woman was setting a long table. Her hair reached down to her spine, and she wore a lovely yellow dress that made her bronze skin shimmer in the light. "Hey," she beamed at me. "You must be Xander." I shrugged. "Yeah? And you are?" "Lorene," she said, just as two kids came running over to her. "Mummy, can we go swimming, please?" "No, we're going to eat now." She patted the head of one of the kids, who had cute pigtails. "Go get your Uncle Marcus and your Auntie Melly. Xander, why don't you grab a seat?" Venomous rage filled me at the mention of Marcus and Melly. "Sure," I said, walking over to the table. I sat down in the corner, glowering at the entrance while the rest of the team came bounding over. "Hey, mate," Archie said. "You made it." Archie made small talk, asking me about the season and pretending to care about my responses, but my mind was elsewhere. I was barely listening, nodding in all the right places. Finally, Marcus and Melly emerged from the house. She was gorgeous, hair tied up in a messy bun, herding the child to the table while cracking jokes with Lorene and Coach Jenkins. Marcus faltered when he saw me, his face twitching before he smoothed it over. "Xander, good to see you," he boomed, giving me a quick pat on the back. But he didn't linger too long, and we both knew it was all for show. My throat constricted. It felt like it was closing in on itself. Why did he regret me? Why couldn't he see how much I idolized him, how much I wanted to be him? Coach Jenkins passed out the burgers and steaks, the rest of the guys chatting about soccer statistics, while I felt like I was drowning. "So, Xander, who's your favorite player? Ronaldo? Messi? Or are you more of a Zlatan fan?" Craig asked, and the others snickered. "Yeah, mate. Who do you model your game after? Can't be too hard to pick with all those highlight reels you probably watch," Rory added, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I ignored them, shoveling a bit of salad onto my plate, hoping they'd drop it. "Come on, mate," Craig pushed. "Are you the type of guy who watches highlights and thinks you're a soccer expert? Or do you actually, understand the game?" "Knock it off," Coach Marcus said, not looking up from his burger. "We're here to enjoy ourselves." "I'm just getting to know him," Craig shrugged. "I mean, how can you call yourself a soccer player if you don't even know the basics? Or maybe your old team just couldn't handle you, huh?" That stung, harder than I expected. The words hit too close to home, especially considering I'd been kicked off my old team before I fled to the UK. "Yeah, I left, but unlike you, I didn't hide behind Easy Banner to cover up how bad I actually am at the game." Rory's smirk faltered, but Craig just leaned back in his chair with a fake laugh. "Ooh, sensitive much? Did you get dropped from your old team because you couldn't keep up?" The mention of it, the whole reason I ran away, was enough to make my chest tighten. That was part of the reason, and my parents' divorce being the main one. "You really think I couldn't keep up?" I bit back. "No, I left because some of us actually care about teamwork and not just running our mouths like a bunch of amateurs." There was a brief, uncomfortable silence before Coach Marcus spoke up again. "All right, enough. We're here to have fun, not to start drama." But I didn't care anymore. The damage was done. I pushed my plate away, standing up from the table. "You know what? Screw this," I muttered, before turning and heading for the door, the laughter and the whispered comments fading behind me. I bolted inside, desperate to escape their jokes. I stumbled through the house, finding Coach Jenkins' bedroom. It was the first place I could think of to hide. I yanked open the nightstand drawer and rifled through it, pushing aside papers and old receipts. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I didn't care. Anything to distract me from the humiliation gnawing at my insides. Suddenly, I heard the door click behind me. I whirled around to see Marcus there. He was so tall he filled the entire doorway, his Everglade eyes pulsating. Marcus took a step inside, the door shutting softly behind him. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. My fists clenched at my sides, anger rising to meet the heat in his gaze. "Why didn't you tell me you had a girlfriend?" Marcus's nostrils flared. "Because it's none of your freaking business." "None of my business?" Is that what you told yourself when you were balls deep inside me? Or when you had your tongue down my throat? "Enough, Xander," Marcus hissed. "It's over." "Not until I say it is." "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" "You think you can just dismiss me? Like I'm nothing? Like I mean nothing. That night at the club I told you I'd never done this before." Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. "I thought you meant like the club." "I meant my first time. I've never done this before, like ever." I threw my hands up in the air. I wanted to see where things would go. I wanted to, but you keep dismissing me. My voice cracked, and I knew how ridiculous I sounded. I barely knew him, but I worshipped him. Marcus turned away, his black hair flopping over his brow. He didn't acknowledge my gaze. He just stared out the window with the same disdainful intensity that I watched him. He was standing rigid now, face twisted in a sneer, domineering a way that made me want to explode. He wanted my submission, my complacency. He wanted me to bend and yield to his version of reality, that it was a mistake, and that I was nothing. But it wasn't true. It wasn't a mistake. I felt something beyond the lust and heat. I felt his soul, a connection, and I knew I wasn't alone in feeling it. Marcus took a deep, shaking breath, his sea-green eyes burning. "What do you want?" The question was a whisper, but I heard it like a roar. What did I want? It was so stupid, so asinine. But nobody ever asked me what I wanted. Nobody ever cared. Not even my parents. They fought with each other over what they wanted. It had nothing to do with me most days. I closed the distance between us, standing right in front of him, peering up into those harsh eyes that were deep, murky waters. "A chance," I breathed. "Don't dismiss me. Don't try to determine my worth. I want a chance. That's all I'm asking. Please." Marcus's mouth cracked open, his lips parted and wet. "A chance." "Yes." I dragged my nose down his jaw, shivering at the black hairs there. "Just one." Marcus captured my lips. The world seemed to collapse around us as his lips took mine. There was no hesitation, no gentleness, just hunger. His mouth was fierce, ravenous, devouring me with an intensity that sent a shudder through my body. His tongue slipped past my lips, exploring, tasting, taking as if he couldn't get enough of me. Every part of me screamed to be closer, to feel more of him. I gripped his windbreaker, my fingers digging into the fabric, as if I could anchor myself in the storm he was creating. The rasp of his beard scraped against my skin, sending waves of sensation coursing through me. His kiss wasn't just a kiss, it was a force, like a riptide pulling me deeper, dragging me under, until nothing existed except the two of us. His lips were brutal, relentless, tugging at mine with a desperate urgency, a rawness that left me breathless. He tasted like fire, like something wild and untamable, and I couldn't stop myself from responding, from giving into the need that pulsed between us. The kiss was a battle, and I didn't care about losing. I wanted to be consumed by it, to let him devour me. His tongue moved, demanding, unyielding, and I met him with equal fervor. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. There was only the heat, the weight of his body against mine, the feeling of being torn apart and put back together in a way I couldn't explain. When he finally pulled away, I was left gasping, my chest heaving as I tried to make sense of the storm he'd just unleashed. His eyes bore into mine, murky and deep, as if he was searching for something. Or maybe he had already found it. "A chance," he muttered again, his voice saturated with something that sounded like regret. Or maybe desire. I couldn't tell. Maybe it was both. If we did this, he had to mean it, because I wasn't going to let him go. Ever. Go. Ever.
Chapter 5. Marcus! Xander gasped as I pressed him against the wall, claiming his mouth like I'd been deprived of him for years. I forgot myself, forgot we were at Jenkins' house, forgot that Millie was right outside, forgot everything except the beautiful boy in my arms. Jesus, I was wrecked. I fisted his hair, dragging him closer, swallowing the soft sounds he made in his throat. He was undisciplined, unruly, cocky, and oh so arrogant. So much like me back then, when I first went pro. But where I failed, could Xander succeed? Xander whimpered, clutching at me. He was lean and mostly muscle, and I kissed down his cheek, sucking a bruise into his neck before I yanked myself away, heaving for air. I cupped his face, staring into his burnt hazel eyes, earth-kissed by spring rains. I tilted his chin up, taking in his cut jaw and fine features. He was a vision. I thumbed over his swollen bottom lip, remembering how he gasped when I was inside him, his dark lashes fluttering shut. Dark as velvet, Xander's lashes framed his eyes perfectly. A sharp knock on the door made us both freeze. "Marcus? Are you in there? Did Xander leave?" Lorraine asked. "No," I said, my voice gruff. "He's right here and he's not going anywhere." "All right. Well, if you finished, come back, ya." Jenkins spoke to the boys, and they'll behave themselves. I promise. Xander bit his bottom lip, and I leaned in, pulled it from his teeth, nibbling on it. Xander melted against me, and I pulled back. He looked absolutely destroyed. "Clean up, then come back." I smoothed a hand down his hip, lifting his shirt to thumb the skin there. "I'll be waiting." Pink exploded over his cheeks, and he gave me a curt nod as I walked out of the room. A chance. It was a mistake. One I kept making. "You all right, mate?" "You haven't even touched your drink," Jenkins said, eyeing my untouched pint. "What's the matter? Did the pint offend you?" "Nothing. Just thinking," I said. "Well, don't hurt yourself, mate," Jenkins snorted. "Oi! Pack it in!" he yelled at the kids, who kept tossing the soccer ball into the water and forcing the dog to jump wildly after it. Jenkins made a face, and the kids ran away screaming to their mother, and I chuckled at him. Love the brats, but damn are they troublesome. Yeah, I toyed with the pint's handle. "So, what's eating ya?" Jenkins asked, draining his glass, his leafy auburn eyes on mine. I looked over my shoulder to Melly, who was talking to Laureen in the kitchen. She threw her head back and laughed at something Laureen said, and I turned away. "Nothing. Just complicated stuff." "Yeah, honestly, I didn't think you'd actually bring her to the barbecue when she mentioned it to Laureen. She said Melly called you." I snorted. "Yeah, out of the blue. It was a shock, especially after she threw me out of her house." "Yeah, what's all that about? You said you guys broke up, but then I heard something else." Jenkins eyed me. "I cheated on her." It was obvious Jenkins already knew, especially with Lorraine and Melly being the best of friends. "Blimey," Jenkins said. "What the hell? You didn't tell me that." I shrugged, but my throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. "I didn't want you to know." "Who?" Jenkins demanded. Come on, mate. Millie's great. Don't tell me you did all of this just to get your shaft wet. I didn't. I tried to force the words out, but I couldn't. I've been having these feelings since high school, and there was no way I could explain them, especially to someone like Jenkins. It just happened, all right? It was a mistake. A mistake that kept happening. Look, I'm out of here. I'll see you at practice tomorrow, yeah. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door, ignoring him calling me back. I made it 5 feet down the driveway when I heard footsteps pounding against the concrete behind me. Oi! Were you just going to leave without saying goodbye? I closed my eyes slowly. Melly. Look, I'm sorry, all right? I'm heading out now. Yeah, I can see that. Melly walked around me so that she was standing in front of me, blocking my path. What I don't understand is why you didn't say goodbye. I looked down at her, taking in her beautiful wide-set mouth, her stunning brown hair pulled into a messy bun. She'd been with me through the worst of it, and I felt like a dog cheating on her, treating her so poorly. She deserved better. Even after our conversation last night, I realized that she was too good. I'm sorry, Melly. She blinked several times, and then her eyes brimmed with tears. So that's it then. You cheat on me, and then you leave me for him. Is that right? I told Millie it was a man, but not that it was one of the players on my team. I'm sorry. Don't say it again. She lifted her hand, as if she could physically stop the words from coming out of my mouth. Why I want to know is why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you continue on with me if you knew you were gay? I didn't know, I said, almost choking on the word. I mean, I suspected, but I loved you, and I wanted to make it work. I'm sorry. Millie's throat bobbed. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I hate you. I nodded. You should. Then I left, walking past her and into the night. Pancakes trotted after me when I got home. The apartment was quiet when I stepped inside, my footsteps creaking against the hardwood. I hesitated before opening the door to my old closet, my shrine to the past. Inside, rows of trophies gleamed under the dim light. FA Youth Cup, the Premier League 2 medal, my England U21 cap, all relics of a future that had been stolen from me. A golden boot from my breakout season, engraved with my name, sat beside the Player of the Month award, both gathering dust. My old jerseys, some framed, others folded, lined the shelves, still carrying the scent of sweat and ambition. For years after my injury, I had felt dead inside. Physiotherapy had taken years, and by then, I was already too old to be considered. Mellie had been there for me through all of it. I loved her. I always would. But I had never felt more alive than I did with Xander. He challenged me, forced me to see beyond what I thought I knew about my entire life. Don't try to determine my worth. He was demanding my respect, and I felt obliged to give it. I had wasted 10 years of my life living a lie, and I knew there was no way I could make it up to Mellie. But Xander was right. He deserved a chance, we both did, to explore the unknown. I clutched the trophies to my chest and wept bitterly. I took the next day off, texting Jenkins to let him know I wouldn't be in. Instead, I took Pancakes to the park, walking aimlessly, breathing in the crisp autumn air. I was in the process of letting go, shedding the old pieces of myself, the things I had clung to for so long, like clenching my fist around sand and watching it slip between my fingers. It was time. Pancakes barked impatiently, tail wagging. waiting for me to throw the ball again. By the 5th game of fetch, I was wheezing, hands on my knees, while he was still bouncing with excitement. I huffed out a laugh. Someone once told me, "Holding on to the past is like carrying water in a broken cup. You only end up thirsty and tired." "All right, you win, brat. Let's go home." We walked home, Pancakes trotting happily at my side, his tail wagging like he hadn't just run me ragged at the park. The sun dipped low, creeping fingers like shadows over the pavement, but I barely noticed. My mind was too tangled in everything I was trying to let go. Old regrets, past failures, the weight of a career that had once defined me. Then I saw him. I stopped dead in my tracks. Xander sat slouched on the concrete steps of my apartment building, black hoodie pulled low over his face, hands stuffed into his grey sweatpants, a duffel bag thrown over his shoulder. My breath caught. He blinked up at me, his long lashes fanning over his cheeks. "Room for one more?" he whispered. The door slammed shut behind us as I kissed him, hard, shoving him against the wall, devouring his mouth with an urgency I'd never known. Pancakes made himself at home on the sofa, content to watch while I ravished Xander, yanking off his hood, cupping his face, tasting the sharp inhale he made when I bit his bottom lip. "You don't have practice?" I gasped between kisses. He laughed. "Don't you?" I pulled back, and he chased my mouth. "What? You didn't go?" "Neither did you," I pointed out, kissing him again. I placed a hand over his chest. "Xander, you can't play hooky just because I did." Xander smirked. "I only go to impress you anyway." "Impress me?" I arched a brow. "What do you mean?" Xander snorted a laugh and put his hands on my waist. "I used to watch you." I waited for him to elaborate, but a flush crawled up his neck. "Okay, I may have been obsessed with you, but back in the day, you were amazing." I stared at him, stunned, as he ducked his head, his fingers flexing against my waist like he hadn't meant to say that out loud. "Go on then," I prompted. Xander huffed, rolling his eyes, but the pink in his cheeks deepened. "You are a legend," he muttered, like he was embarrassed to admit it. "Youngest player to debut in the FA Cup at 17. Scored the winning goal in extra time during the semi-finals. Named Player of the Year before you were even 20. Had offers from the Premier League knocking at your door." I swallowed hard, gripping his hoodie. "You had it all, Marcus. Speed, vision, control. You played like the game was made for you." His voice softened. "I wanted to be just like you." My throat closed up. Hell, I had posters of you in my room. Drove my dad insane. I barked out a laugh, but it came out strained. He didn't know. He had no idea how much those words cut, how deep they sank. Once upon a time, I had it all, and then I lost it. I pulled him into another kiss, desperate to drown in him, to shut out the past clawing at my throat. Xander sighed into my mouth, molding against me, his hand sliding under my shirt, warm and searching. Pancakes huffed from the couch, clearly unimpressed. Xander grinned against my lips. "Your dog's judging us." "He'll get over it," I muttered, kissing him harder. Xander's head fell back, and I kissed his neck, groaning at the taste of his skin. God, he was amazing. I never wanted this to end. I pulled away before things got too heated. "We should cool it," I said, taking a step back, but he didn't follow. Instead, he nodded and pulled off his hoodie, revealing a black Nike muscle shirt underneath. "What did you have planned today?" he asked, settling on the sofa and scratching pancakes behind the ears. I shrugged. "Nothing. Just relax mainly." I cleared my throat. "I broke things off with Millie." Xander's eyes flashed with heat, and if pancakes wasn't there, I was sure he would have leaped across the couch to kiss me again. "Oh, how'd she take it?" "Not well, but You were right. We deserve a chance." I pondered it for a moment. "Actually, do you want to see my old trophies?" Xander lit up like the 4th of July, and I took him to my spare room, where all my memorabilia was displayed. He walked around, his face full of awe as he picked up this and that, his expression almost reverent. "God, I feel like such a cliché," I chuckled. "The player who falls for his fan." I shook my head. "So you admit you're falling for me?" Xander smirked, inspecting one of my trophies. "Not until I know more about you. Who is Xander Reyes?" "I'm the chance you never got," Xander replied, his face serious. A shudder passed through me as my breath stilled. "You can't say stuff like that to me." "Why not?" Xander asked. "You gave up. You were one of the best players in the league, and you gave up." I laughed bitterly. I got injured and retired. It seemed like the best thing to do at the time. "I've seen you run on the field. You aren't that injured," Xander argued. "You can play again." "Look," I said, cutting him off. "This is cute, but it's not realistic. I'm 30, you're 20. For you, everything is sunshine and puppies, but in the real world, I have bills to pay. I can't just drop everything and play pro." "Why not?" "You're exhausting." I rolled my eyes and walked out of the room. "Why are you talking about me anyway? We should be talking about you." "What do you want to know?" Xander asked, following me. He kept the trophy clasped in his hand, with a sort of reverence that was startling and unnerving. "My parents are divorced. I study accounting even though it's mind-numbingly boring. I do like puppies. I play like a beast and fight like one too. And I like you." Xander said the last word so shyly, I felt my face warm. "I like you a lot, Marcus." "Really?" I couldn't tell, I deflected, then grabbed some pots and pans from the drawers to start cooking. "Can you cook?" "No," Xander said, standing beside me. "Come on, I'll make you an English dinner." "Not that beans on toast crap." Xander wrinkled his nose. I burst out laughing. "Nah, something better. Bangers and mash with onion gravy. Come on, you'll love it." I pulled out the ingredients, focusing on the task at hand. But Xander wasn't done with his questions. "Come on," he urged, leaning in a little too close. "Tell me something I don't already know about you." I glanced over at him, raising an eyebrow. "How am I supposed to know what you already know, huh? You little creep." I nudged his hip with my elbow as I grabbed the onions, prepping them for the pan. "Oh, I'm sure you have plenty to share. Don't be shy." I rolled my eyes, trying to keep my focus on chopping. "Fine," I muttered, cutting the onion in half. I used to sneak off after practice when no one was looking, just to get some quiet time to think, away from the cameras, the pressure. Just me and my thoughts. Xander watched me intently. "That's not what I expected." "Yeah, well, you don't know everything," I said, grinning a little as I turned to look at him. "Why'd you quit?" he asked quietly. I turned to stare at him, realizing all too late how close he was, his breath ghosting over my cheek. The question cracked open everything I'd hidden over the years, all the ugliness of the business that they never told you. because nobody believed in me anymore. There. I said it. Those were the facts. During my recovery, Millie only wanted me to focus on getting better, on finding employment, on leaving everything behind. But I couldn't, which explained how I ended up as a coach. "I believe in you," Xander whispered. "What is this? The power of one?" I laughed, but tears pricked my eyes. Nobody had said that to me in years. "It doesn't matter. I'm a coach now, Xander, and that's all I'll ever be." "Not to me," Xander muttered, then went back to the stove. "All right, so how do we turn this thing on?" I looked at him incredulously, and he burst out laughing. I followed suit. God, it felt good to laugh. And he wasn't wrong. Maybe, to some degree, I was already falling. To some degree, I was already falling.
Chapter 6, Xander. Soccer was the rhythm that shaped me, the drumbeat of my childhood, the only language my feet ever truly spoke. I could have played for hours, for days on end, if I was ever allowed it. New white rays filter through the curtain, illuminating its shifting tan hues like sunlit sand dunes, steady yet fluid, marking a new day. I woke with a tender mouth, my skin feeling too tight from all the heavy petting from last night. After dinner, Marcus and I sat on the sofa and spoke for hours, lost in our own little world, while pancakes occasionally broke us apart with a bark or shuffling into our laps. Aerial pink floated in the background behind us, the music twinkling and lifting, making me feel as if I were high or intoxicated or both. Then Marcus kissed me, mapped out my skin with his hands, shaped the innermost parts of me with a selflessness that caused me to see stars. When he dropped me home, I almost wept. After my parents' divorce, nobody touched me. My mom rarely did, and Dad was never here. Yet they continued to pass me back and forth between them like a volleyball. Now, in the golden light of morning, I turned onto my side, pressing my face into the pillow. My body still hummed with the memory of him, every place he touched tingling, as if he'd left something behind, something unseen but felt in every fiber of my being. The way Marcus looked at me, like he was seeing something no one else had ever bothered to. The way he whispered my name, like it was sacred. The way he traced my jaw with his thumb, his touch reverent, careful, like I might disappear if he wasn't careful. I should text him, or maybe I shouldn't. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, the pressure of something nameless pressing against my chest, something terrifying, something wonderful. "Xander breakfast," my mom called, breaking me from my thoughts. Right, breakfast. I forced myself up, rubbing my hands over my face before swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. My body ached, not unpleasantly, but in a way that made last night feel even more real. Marcus. God, what was I going to do with him? I headed to university, but my mind was elsewhere. Marcus, his hands, his mouth, the way he made me feel weightless and grounded all at once. I barely remembered the walk to the locker room, only snapping back to reality when I noticed a group of my teammates snickering near my locker. My steps slowed, suspicion creeping in. Then I saw it. The word wanker scrawled across my locker in thick black marker. A familiar rage curled in my gut, slow and simmering. My fists clenched at my sides as I turned, and there he was, Craig, twirling the marker between his fingers, a smug little smirk pulling at his lips. It wouldn't take much, just one swing, a clean right hook to wipe that grin off his face. But then what? Yeah, then what? I'd get kicked off the team, but so would he. From the corner of my eye, I caught Archie pretending to organize his locker, sneaking glances at me like I was about to explode. Were they wrong to expect it? When I first arrived, I had been angry, resentful. My parents had just divorced, and I wanted to latch on to Marcus, but he wasn't giving me the time of day. I had come in hot, too cocky, too defensive, and now this was where it had gotten me. In the office, Jenkins and Marcus were going over plays. If this kept up, if we kept ragging on each other instead of getting our heads in the game, we could lose our first match. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to unclench my fists. All right, I said. You win? Craig's brows shot up. You what? You win, I repeated. I was a dick. You were right. I was cocky and going through my own crap, but I want to play. I want to win. And you guys are pretty good. Pretty good? Craig scoffed. We're the Savage Falcons. We're the best damn team in the league. You should be honored to play with us. Most of us are going pro, mate. He wrinkled his nose, still wary. Look, we all tried to be nice to you, but even I can't be nice to a witch with a broomstick shoved up their ass. The guy snickered. I nodded. Fair enough. Are we good? Craig's brown eyes dragged up and down my body before he gave a short nod. All right, mate. Let bygones be bygones. We shook hands just as Jenkins stuck his head out of the office. What are you lot still mucking about for? On the pitch. Now. I hurried to get dressed, shaking off the lingering argument, and as I pulled my jersey over my head, Archie clapped me on the back, a silent acknowledgement that I had handled things right. Then Marcus stepped out of the office, his signature backward cap in place, a smile curving his lips. It was a private smile meant just for me. Hello? Hi, I murmured, suddenly breathless, and then he was gone, taking my thundering heart with him. The sun bore down on the pitch, heat radiating off the turf in thick, shimmering waves. My pulse pounded in my ears as I sprinted down the field, the ball a blur between my feet. Move it, Coach Marcus hollered from the sidelines. Faster transitions. Cam, get in position. Xander, watch your left. I barely had time to register the warning before a body slammed into mine. Craig. The impact sent a shockwave through my ribs, but I held my ground, gritting my teeth as I twisted away from his attempted steal. The ball was still mine. Craig laughed breathlessly. Not bad, mate. Not done yet. I shot back, already shifting my weight, cutting through defenders like a knife. The game was ruthless. Sweat dripped down my temple, my lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. Every pass, every feint, every pivot had to be on point. One mistake, and the other team would capitalize. Craig, now! I yelled. I launched the ball forward, watching as Craig caught it cleanly on the outside of his cleat before sending it screaming toward the goal. The keeper lunged, but it was too late. The ball slammed into the back of the net. A roar erupted across the pitch. Our team surged forward, celebrating, but we had no time to rest. Reset, Marcus shouted, his hands cupped around his mouth. Stay sharp. We play until the whistle. A whistle blew for the restart, and the opposing team wasted no time retaliating. The next 5 minutes were a blur of shouts and bodies colliding. Archie took a rough hit near midfield. I barely dodged a slide tackle that could have snapped my ankle. Craig, to my surprise, was covering my back instead of shoving me into the dirt. Then, the counterattack. It happened fast. A break in our defense. Their striker charging down the field, too quick, too clean. Get back. Marcus's voice cracked through the air. Defend, now. I didn't think, I just moved. Sprinting full tilt, I closed the gap. My legs burned, my chest screamed for air, but I pushed harder. At the last second, I cut in, stole the ball clean, my cleats scraping against the turf as I spun away and sent it flying downfield. Craig was already there. One touch, one shot. The net rippled. Goal. The whistle blew. The game was over. My heart beat loudly in my chest as the team surged forward, shouting, laughing, and pushing each other in excitement. I turned toward the sideline, where Marcus stood with his hands on his hips, his eyes locked on me, in an unreadable gaze. Then, just for a second, he smiled. That smile sent a warmth through me, deep and steady, sinking all the way to my bones. After practice, Marcus yanked me into a hurried embrace, pressing quick, eager kisses to my face. That was brilliant, he said breathlessly. That move you pulled at the last minute. Priceless. My chuckle broke off into a helpless groan as I melted into him. Yeah? Did you like it? I loved it, he murmured, still grinning. I stole it from you, you know? Marcus scoffed. Please, I would never be that reckless on the pitch. The way you cut in on the overlap and did that flick past Craig? Borderline disrespectful. Borderline? I shot back. arching a brow. He was eating grass when I was done with him. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. Yeah, but you nearly lost control of the ball when you hit that Cruyff turn. Nearly, I repeated pointedly, but I didn't. You saw the finish. Top bins, baby. Marcus hummed, mock-stroking his chin. All right, fair. But that roulette spin you tried? Risky. High risk, high reward, I said smugly. If it works, it's genius. If it doesn't, it's a bloody disaster, Marcus finished, rolling his eyes. You're lucky it worked. If Jenkins had seen you lose possession, he would have skinned you alive. Then it's a good thing I'm just that good, huh? Oh God, your ego is insufferable. Marcus groaned. I laughed, grabbing my bag. I've got to get home. My dad's leaving today. Marcus made a small whining noise, tugging on my sleeve. Okay, but you'll come around later? Of course, I said, smirking. Pancakes would miss me too much. Marcus gave me a playful shove. Uh-huh, sure. The dog, not me. Exactly? I winked. Bring a change of clothes to stay the night. Now, that caught me off guard. It would be the first time we ever spent the night together. I swallowed, pretending like my heart wasn't hammering. Yeah, all right. His lips twitched, his eyes warm as he leaned in, brushing his nose against mine. Good. I'll be waiting. Is this what love felt like? I stared at myself in the mirror, asking that question. I felt giddy and hot all over at the prospect of spending the night with Marcus. The first time at the club had been rushed, a mess of limbs and hot breaths, but what he was offering now was something slow and sweet. Exploration. I turned to check out my back, tracing the crisscross of scars there. What would he think of them? Would he be turned off? What if I was bad at it? The intimacy. What if I didn't know what to do? Xander, my mom called. Your dad's leaving now. I grabbed my packed duffel bag and headed downstairs, where my dad stood by the door, ready to go. I was surprised they weren't arguing this time. Walk me to the taxi, my dad said. Where are you going with your stuff? Mom asked, eyeing my bag. To a friend's house. I'm staying the night, I lied. All right, she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Have a good time. I followed my dad out the door as the taxi pulled up to the curb. The driver helped load his luggage into the trunk, and my dad sighed, patting my arm. I know your mother and I haven't always had the best track record. Sometimes, despite our best intentions, we become our own worst nightmares. He paused, looking at me seriously. But look after her, yeah? She loves you a great deal. I will, I promised, chewing on my bottom lip. Dad? Yeah? He turned to me. There's no girl, I said. It's a guy, a man. My dad stared at me in shock. And I took a deep breath. I don't want to study accounting. I want to play soccer. He shuffled his feet, looking away. The silence stretched, squeezing my lungs painfully. What would he say? Would he hate me? Did he already? Just as tears burned at my eyes, he released a soft laugh. Well, no half-assed truths with you, eh? He yanked me into a hug, his grip firm, familiar. All right, but finish your degree first, and then we'll talk about going pro. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. And as for the, gay thing, well, don't tell your mother just yet. It'll be our little secret. A sob burst out of me, and I clung to him. Thank you, I whispered. I love you, Xander, he murmured, holding me tight. You'll do great things. Just remember, dreams belong to everyone. We stood there a while longer, just holding each other, and then he was gone. I wiped my face, snatched my duffel bag from the curb, and walked to Marcus's house. I stopped by the store to get some liquid courage, then knocked on Marcus's door. Hey, Marcus beamed when he opened the door, and pancakes jumped all over me. I laughed, scratching his ears and kissing him on top of his head. Down, boy, I called first dibs. Marcus teased. I chuckled again as Marcus kissed me, his beard scraping against my chin. He pulled away all too soon and took my duffel bag off my shoulder. I'll put this in the bedroom. Make yourself at home. I nodded, following pancakes into the living room, where the highlights were playing. A delicious smell drifted from the kitchen. "What are you making?" I called to Marcus. "Toad in the hole," he yelled back. I wrinkled my nose. "What are you trying to do? Poison me? I'm not eating toads." His laughter trickled over me as he came pounding into the living room with pancakes hot on his heels. "Nah, mate, how'd you explain it? It's like sausages, Yorkshire pudding, and onion gravy all mixed into one." "Oh," I laughed. "Sounds delicious." Well, it's ready so we can start eating," Marcus said. I set the table, already feeling at home here. The apartment was quaint, nothing like what I was expecting when I learned Marcus Hayes was living here. But then again, it was perfect for him. We sat down, and Marcus muttered grace before we started eating. "So, your dad gone?" he asked. "Yup," I said. "Now it's just me and Mom, at least until the next fight." Must have been traumatic as a kid." "You could say that," I shrugged, taking a sip of the wine I'd bought. "I got used to it, you know. Besides, they're better off apart. Some people just can't live together." "I hear you, mate," Marcus replied. I hesitated, fiddling with my food. I told him about you." "Oh?" Marcus arched a brow. "Really?" "I told him I was gay." "How'd he take it?" "Better than I expected. Now I just have my mum to deal with," I laughed. But it sounded self-deprecating. I had no idea how she'd react, but at least someone knew. "It's been a crazy day." Marcus stood, walking over to stand beside me. He placed his hands on my shoulders and gently massaged me. I sighed into his skillful touch, feeling the anxiety in my body begin to melt away. "I've got you," he murmured. I gripped his wrist, turning his large hand and pressing a kiss to the back, nuzzling my face into his skin. Marcus's eyes darkened with desire, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his hand came up to thread through my hair, his blunt fingernails digging in as he fisted it. "If you keep doing that," he growled, "Pancakes is going to have himself a feast, because I'm seriously tempted to drag you off right here and ravish you." I chuckled, my breath coming out in a soft, shaky laugh. "Is that so? Maybe I should make it more tempting then?" His grip tightened in my hair. "Keep it up, and you won't have time to make any more moves. I'll be too busy making you forget your name." "If you think you can top me, you're gonna have to try a lot harder than that, coach." "Oh, I will." His laugh rumbled in his chest. We continued eating, the heat thrumming between us, each touch, each glance fueling the fire. When the last bite was finished, we did the dishes in silence. Our hands brushed occasionally, eyes colliding, speaking volumes without a word. Once we were done, I headed straight to the bedroom, peeling off my shirt and pants as I went. "Stay!" I heard Marcus order Pancakes as he followed after me, and the bedroom door slammed shut behind him. Marcus crashed into me, pressing his chest to my back, gripping my chin, and capturing my lips in a heated kiss. My hands stroked his beard, moving his long hair out of his face so I could see him better. I kissed him again, this time with my tongue. I held him tighter, deepening the kiss. Marcus's hand went up to my cheek, caressing it gently. His cold hand against my warm skin made me shiver. The taste of our mouths was sinful, but it didn't bother me. It was addicting, and it made me want him more. We both held each other tightly, our hearts beating as one. He led me to the bed, still kissing, his hands smoothing up and down my skin. But then he paused at the ridged scars on my back. "What happened?" he asked softly. I shrugged. "Some guys from my old team. They robbed me, and I tried to fight back. They tied me to a bike and took off down the street, dragged me a quarter of a block before I passed out." "Jesus," Marcus whispered. "That's also why I moved." I swallowed, the words coming out a little shakier. "Back then, everything was crap. I'm bad at making friends, too cocky and blunt. But when I moved here, I didn't know anyone. All I had were posters of you to keep me sane." "Me?" Marcus's voice was soft, almost disbelieving. "Yeah." I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. "Everything about you. I worship you." "I'm not a god, Xander. I've lied. I've cheated. I'm human. You may be disappointed when you get to know me." I shook my head vehemently. No, never. I meant, I worship you because you changed my life. You made me better. I know you're human, and I idolize you. But you are what my dreams could become. Really? A crappy coach making minimum wage and barely surviving? Maybe you should set your sights a little higher. I laughed. No, I meant everything you've accomplished in your life. It's crazy. I think you're one of the greats, Marcus. You just need to get back out there. Your life isn't over yet. Marcus sighed. When you say stuff like that, you make me think I can do or be anything. Why can't you? I whispered, kissing his chin. Why can't you dare to be more than this? Marcus's green eyes landed on me with strange intensity, and then he rose over me, pressing me down onto the bed. I'm not worth all this investment. You are to me, I cupped his face. I believe in you. Marcus growled and kissed me again. My hands went under the multiple layers of clothing on his torso, tugging at them. I was practically begging him to remove them. He noticed my desperate action and began to remove his clothes slowly. I admired his muscular body, taut and firm, so much sturdier than I was. But I loved it. I loved him. Together, we chased the heavens. I loved him. Together, we chased the heavens.
Chapter 7. Marcus. When I awoke the next morning, there was a weight on top of me, and just for a moment I thought Pancakes had learned to climb onto the bed and was planning to smother me to death with kisses. It was only the satiny dark hair covering the face that prevented me from launching Pancakes off my torso and onto the floor. Xander. I pushed his hair out of my vision, feeling the strands between my fingers. It was glossy and thick, smelling faintly of sandalwood and musk. I breathed it in. Xander lay limp, sleep holding him in his grip, and he likely wouldn't wake for another hour or two, considering the many rounds we went through last night. My heart was racing, the closeness making the heat between us almost dizzying. I shifted, rearranging us so that I could place my hand over his smooth midsection, tracing the curve of his back. I tucked the stray hair behind his ears, taking in the fine lines of his face, his neck, lily-soft and exposed, with several mouth-shaped bites on his shoulder blades and collarbone. What had gotten into me last night? I was worse than Pancakes. A chuckle rumbled in my chest, but Xander didn't stir. He stayed silent, almost like dead weight on top of me. I left my head flopped back on the pillow and stared up at the ceiling, wondering what the hell of this meant. The love-making had been amazing. I was enthralled. I am raptured. Xander yielded to me, unfurling. Past all the pain and hatred burning in his eyes, I found a softness, a velvet pillow to rest my head. I smoothed a hand down his narrow waist, past his hip bone, pausing on the juncture there, my thumb brushing over his skin. What was it about him that made me feel like anything was possible? Was it possible? Xander groaned, stretching his limbs, his eyes blinking open. Morning, he whispered. Morning. I kissed his lips. How'd you sleep? Like a mummy, he chuckled. I don't want to leave this bed. I don't want you to leave either. I kissed him again, nuzzling this time, lingering. We should, though. It's almost past noon. Your mum will be worried. I want you to meet her, Xander said, his words catching me off guard. I couldn't believe it. It was too soon, wasn't it? Then I realized with Xander, nothing was too soon. I just got out of a 10-year relationship with Melly. There was no way I could consider committing to him. Aside from that, I was Xander's coach. Even though Xander was an adult, the relationship would still be frowned upon. I could be sacked. What was I doing rushing into this? Xander played with the dark hairs on my chest. Too soon? Yeah, Sorry, I said, but I'll probably meet her during your first game. You could introduce me then. Xander side-eyed me. I knew that wasn't what he meant to do. He probably wanted to introduce me to her as his boyfriend. I wasn't ready for all of that just yet. Melly and I had broken up a little less than a week ago. I should wait, for her sake as well as mine. We needed to take things slow. Are you okay with that? I mean, we just started this. Things between us. I don't think it would be wise to rush. I'm okay with it, Xander said quietly. I like you too much not to be. I like you too, I admitted. A lot. Enough to risk my entire career. Xander wrapped his arms around my neck. Yeah? And what do you like about me? Your mouth, for starters, I leaned in. Though it gets you into trouble as much as it does me. I let my hand trail down his flanks. Your wit, your stubbornness, your body. My thumb brushed his hip. Your face, not too shabby to look at either. Xander snorted. Not too shabby. All right, fine. You're dangerously good-looking. A menace, really. He laughed, the sound vibrating through my chest. Thanks. He regarded me, eyes twinkling with mischief. Why don't you play against me? My brows shot up. What, like, now? Why not? Let's take Pancakes to the park and play a game. Whip you into shape. I scoffed. No, I don't play anymore. Come on, Xander whined, bumping his forehead against mine. You are so good, you can be again. And besides, you're not even that old. He grinned. Please. I groaned. Fine. But only because America has the most nuclear weapons in the world, and I'd like to stay on your good side. I rolled him over with a grin, pinning him beneath me. Before he could say a word, I kissed him senseless, my lips crashing into his with a desperate, hungry intensity. His breath hitched as my hands roamed, pulling him closer. He kissed me back just as fiercely, as if we were both trying to savor every moment. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only us in this tangled mess of desire and heat. We set up the pylons, and Xander dashed ahead, the oversized t-shirt bouncing on his back as he jogged. Pancakes trotted behind, tail wagging, but my eyes were locked on Xander. He kicked the ball, sending it rolling toward me. I lunged, but Xander was already one step ahead, cutting across my path. His foot connected with the ball, sending it skidding toward the goal. You're quick, but I'm not done yet! I pushed harder, my heart pounding, my feet scrambling for traction. Xander's grin widened as he twisted and turned, mocking my slow recovery. He moved like a blur, and it stung. I was his coach. I should be doing better than this. Come on, old man, Xander teased. You gotta be faster than that. You wish. My legs were burning, but I wouldn't stop. I had to keep up. I leveled up, pushing harder, resolute not to let him get the best of me. He moved past me, but I anticipated his next move, and with a burst of energy, I closed the gap. I slid to intercept the ball just as he kicked it again, sending it spiraling out of his control. Not this time, I shouted, flicking the ball toward the open goal. Xander lunged, but I faked left, dribbled right, and slammed the ball into the net. Goal! I yelled, pumping my fist in victory as I collapsed onto the grass, chest heaving. Pancakes leapt on me, licking my face, his tail wagging furiously. Oh, I know where your mouth has been, I laughed, shoving him away. Xander walked over, hands on his hips, still panting. Not bad, not bad. Looks like I've met my match. I grinned up at him. You're pretty good, but I've still got a few moves left. Guess I'll have to step up my game next time. Xander chuckled, sitting next to me. He leaned in, ruffling my hair. You're not so rusty after all. Who says I'm rusty? I smirked. Nobody. He leaned in and stole a kiss. My heart rammed into my throat like a freight train, and I looked around to make sure nobody saw us. But Xander was still grinning over me, his smile deepening. You're bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. And you love it, Xander said, kissing me again. At almost every day leading up to the big game, we spent hours in the field, Pancakes loyally trailing behind as we laughed, kissed, and played soccer under the golden sun. The world around us melted away, leaving only the two of us, my training steadily improving with every kick, every move. We spent more time at my apartment after, our bodies intertwined in ways that left me breathless. Xander's presence was my motivation to push harder, to get better. I reached out to my old physiotherapist, Dustin, who assured me I was in excellent shape. Just keep working on your flexibility, he advised. I also contacted Izzy, my old PR rep. She agreed to start looking at teams, but made it clear, you'll need to train like you never stopped. For a retired player returning to the league after injury, the process wasn't simple. Extensive medical evaluations, physical assessments, and proper training were key to proving readiness. After all, age and injury didn't discriminate, but the will to succeed did. I took Xander to a bar across town for drinks, the lively atmosphere buzzing around us. It felt good, almost too good, until I spotted her. Melly. My stomach dropped, panic rising in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready to come out to her yet. Even though I had cheated on her with a man, I wasn't sure I could say the words aloud just yet. They seemed almost damning, like after admitting it, there was no turning back. Xander noticed, his brows furrowing as he sensed my sudden shift in mood. Are you all right? He asked, leaning in. Before I could answer, Melly spotted me. She smiled and made her way over, and I cursed under my breath. Crap. She walked right up to me, her eyes scanning me with a smirk. Is that your date? Is he even old enough to have a drink? Melly, I started, but she was already pulling me aside. All right, she laughed, her eyes bright. I'll stop. You look good, Marcus. You too, I said, trying to steady myself. She shrugged. Yeah, well, I got a cheating bastard of an ex-boyfriend, but who's counting? Her expression softened. Are you happy? I glanced at Xander, who was pretending to watch the game, but I could see his eyes straying back to us every few seconds. I snorted. I am. I might start playing again. Melly's eyes widened in shock. Really? Because of him? I remember him from Jenkins. Isn't he on your team? Yeah, but don't tell anyone. Isn't that like a huge conflict of interest? We're working it out. I thought about it, turning it over in my head. And I'm not just happy because of him, but because of me too. I owe it to myself to try. I need to try, Melly. Wow, you've changed. Her smile grew. Do you know what? Good for you, mate. I'm happy for you. She laughed, her eyes warm. Thanks, I said, looking at her. And I'm sorry about everything. She shrugged it off. Yeah, well, you can't win them all, especially the gay ones. Would you like to meet him again? Talk to him, I asked cautiously. Nah, Melly patted my arm. I won't go that far. Good luck, though. We hugged, and I watched her go, knowing that I had wronged her, and I would never be able to make up for it. But I knew one day she would be happy. I walked back over to Xander, threading my hands through his hair and kissing the top of his head. "Thank you." "For what?" Xander asked, looking up at me puzzled. "For everything," I thought. "For pulling me from the ruins of my own making. For the way your presence makes everything feel less broken. For the way you've stood here by my side when I couldn't stand alone." But the words never fully formed, caught somewhere in the tangled mess of things unsaid. Instead, I kissed him again, deeply, fiercely, as if the kiss itself could speak the things my mouth failed to utter. I pulled away, heat rising to my cheeks. Luckily, nobody had seen us, and I sat beside Xander, his thigh brushing mine. I looked over at Millie, who was laughing with her own friends, and a man who seemed to look at her like she hung the moon. Yeah, we were all going to be just fine. The stadium hummed with raw energy, the crowd's shouts vibrating through my bones. Every player felt it. The first game, the pressure to win. A loss now would crush them, darken everything they'd worked for. This was more than a game. It was everything. The stakes couldn't be higher, and they knew it. The Savage Falcons were trailing by one, the clock ticking down, each second an increasing ache. One mistake, one slip, and it was all over. I could barely breathe. Xander had the ball. He moved down the field, his feet light, his eyes scanning the players in front of him. The defenders closed in, but Xander didn't flinch. He kept moving, weaving past them, his body fluid, almost effortless. I could feel the tension building in me, an electricity that sparked in every inch of my body. Would he make it? Would he be able to do this? Xander was now a few yards from the goal. The goalie was ready, his stance low, eyes fixed. Xander faked left, then right, dodging another defender. I held my breath, the world narrowing to this one moment. With a smooth, controlled motion, Xander kicked the ball. It flew like a bullet toward the goal. The goalie reached, fingertips grazing it, but it was too fast, too well placed. The ball slammed into the net with a resounding crack. Victory! The stadium erupted, the sound deafening. Xander's teammates piled on top of him, lifting him into the air like a hero. He punched the sky, his joy contagious, his grin stretched wide. I stood still, feeling something in me release. It was more than just a win. It was a moment of redemption, of proving that no matter how much pressure or doubt there had been, Xander had carried them to the end. He'd fought through it all and had come out on top. Watching him, I realized something important. Dreams don't die if you don't let them. You have to fight for them, even when everything feels impossible. Xander taught me that. Dreams don't fade unless we let them. Even the broken ones. The end.